Welcome to the Body First Healing podcast. I'm Britt Piper, survivor turned somatic experiencing practitioner and author. If you feel stuck in old patterns, overwhelmed by your emotions, or disconnected from yourself, you're in the right place. Each week, I'll share practical somatic tools, personal stories, and conversations to support you in building a more regulated and embodied life. Because you can't talk your way through healing, you have to feel your way through. Together, we'll explore what it means to come back to yourself and create a life that feels safe enough to fully live in. I am so glad that you're here. Hello, my friend. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Body First Healing podcast. I am your host, Britt Piper, somatic experiencing practitioner, author, and trainer. And today, guys, we are doing a fully embodied Q&A solo episode based on questions that you have sent in. And I love when we get to do a Q&A episode because it so reminds me of the Q&A calls that we do weekly in the Body First Healing program. This just feels like such a comfortable space for me to be speaking with you guys today. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And I, of course, just want to state here from the very beginning that the questions that come out of this community are never, ever shallow. So expect that today we are truly going to go deep. Today we're going to explore, first of all, how shame shows up in the body and what it means to heal the fear of being seen. This is something I recently talked about on my social media. We're also going to talk about how loud food thoughts and eating disorder history are really about nervous system regulation. We're going to chat about how to think about massage and bodywork for somatic release and back pain. Someone asked a question around how to somatically prepare for psychedelic assisted therapy. I have lots of thoughts on that. My hope is that this episode feels less like information, okay, and more like sitting together in a circle, because that's honestly what it feels like every week when we have these Q&A calls in the Body First Healing program. So as you listen back to each question, my hope is that you feel these answers really being reflected in your body, that you feel more understood and more honored for anything that you've had to go through. Now, before we dive in today, I want to share a listener review. First of all, thank you so much, Mary Tilson, for this kind message. It says, insightful and relatable. Britt has an incredible ability to take complex topics and make them easily digestible and relatable. Thank you, Mary. Her passion for this work is evident in the way that she makes nervous system education and resources for trauma healing freely available across multiple digital platforms. So grateful for this new podcast. Mary, that was so kind. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is so true, you guys. I love to spread this message of somatic and nervous system healing as far and as wide as humanly possible. So whether you see me on YouTube, whether you listen to this podcast, whether you see me on TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, or have read my book, I am trying to reach into every corner of our digital world so that we can spread the message of how incredible somatic healing is. All right, let's jump into our questions for today. And I want to start today with a question that I feel like lives in almost every nervous system that I know. Okay, and that question is, what can I do to heal this fear of being seen? And how does shame show up in the body and in our posture? So this recently came up in a Body First Healing program call in our Monday somatic resource and reset call, or what I lovingly call our nervous system gym call, where we take 30 minutes together on Zoom to get out of our head and into our bodies to really regulate the nervous system through experiential somatic practices. Now, I talked about this as well on an Instagram Live because what I watched during that weekly group call honestly felt like a live demonstration of shame physiology. So during the call, I asked everyone to pause and to notice what their body was doing in the moment that they imagined being fully seen. Not just seen socially, like posting on Instagram, but being fully seen in their truth, in their authenticity, in their tenderness, and in their needs. And as they tuned in, I watched an entire Zoom gallery shift across my screen. For instance, chests that had been open started to kind of cave in. Spines that were more upright began to curve forward and collapse. Eyes that had been looking at the screen and were present started to drift down or off to the side. And there was breath that had been like moving, in this steady way, but then was suddenly shortened or paused. And this is what shame looks like inside the body. Now, we often think of shame as a story in the mind, right? Like, I am bad, or I am wrong, or I am too much, and I am not enough. And yes, that's what it could sound like. But before shame becomes language, it actually starts as a reflex. So from a nervous system perspective, shame is actually a social survival strategy. It is the body's way of saying, if I contract, if I become smaller, if I take up less space, I might be allowed to stay. Now, you see this in the collapse of the sternum, as if the body is physically shielding the heart. I can often see it in rounded shoulders in my clients, as if the body is trying to fold around this vulnerable front body. I can see it in the tilt of a head down, which kind of narrows the visual field and decreases and disconnects from eye contact. I can see it in the way that the breath moves high and shallow, really being held and braced, or almost it disappears. So posture becomes a map of what kept you safe. And if visibility once came with criticism or shaming or emotional invasion or punishment, then your system learns it is safer if I am less, if I am smaller. So your physiology rehearses that over and over again until it feels like, quote, you. So when you ask, okay, how do I heal a fear of being seen? We are not just talking about confidence. We are talking about uncoupling, okay? Disconnecting visibility from threat in your nervous system. And here's the piece that I really, really want to name, okay? The antidote to shame is not, I am good, okay? That can still keep you in that binary of good and bad. The antidote to shame is actually, I am powerful. Shame says, I am bad, so I must shrink. Healthy aggression, healthy necessary fight response says, I am powerful, so I can take my place here. Now, when I say aggression, I do not mean violence, okay? I mean the biological energy that lets you move forward, that lets you set a boundary, stand taller, use your voice, push against the world when needed, and really engage your large muscles in the body in the service of your life, to go after what you want, to advocate for yourself and for others. Now, most of us had that energy shamed out of us early on. And in the Body First Healing program, a big part of our work is helping you to slowly reclaim that healthy power. If you guys have read my book, Body First Healing, you know I have an entire chapter called Rising into Power, Healthy Aggression and Your Life Force. Okay, so we do this by not forcing posture, okay, into a confident shape, but by inviting the physiology and the nervous system to remember that it's allowed to take up space. Now, practically, this can look like letting your spine rise one vertebrae at a time rather than forcing yourself into an upright position. It could look like learning to feel the heat in your body when you say no or when you imagine speaking up for yourself, and then staying with that heat for half a second longer than feels familiar. We stretch your physiology. We stretch your nervous system without overwhelming or stressing it. We can also do this by inviting your thighs, your glutes, and the back muscles, okay, in the back body to subtly engage so that your body feels supported from behind as you come slightly more forward from the front. You can also do this by letting your arms kind of move away from the body, okay, even a little, so that your nervous system feels that you have reach, right? You're not just retreating and hiding with the arms. Remember here that we are not trying to dominate, okay? We are letting the biology and the body remember that it was created to participate in life, okay? Not shut down, not run away. And over time, that shame can start to soften, not because you talk yourself out of it, okay? It's important to state that, but because your system discovers that taking up just a little bit more space does not lead to the same relational harm than perhaps it once did. Okay, that younger part that learned to disappear begins to trust your adult body in the here and now to lead. So when you feel that familiar collapse of shame, okay, instead of scolding yourself, you might simply say, of course you fold here. Of course you collapsed. That used to keep us safe. But today, we're going to let the spine rise just 1 millimeter. I'm here. I am powerful. We can try something different. Now, that is how the posture of shame slowly becomes this new posture of reclaimed power. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. I could talk about shame until I'm blue in the face. You guys know that's something that I personally really had to work through in my own healing. Question number 2 from all of you wonderful listeners. How can I listen to my body when I have loud thoughts about the amount of food that I am eating? You've spoken about having an eating disorder in the past. How can somatic experiencing help? First of all, I really, really love this question, and I want to go deeper. I'm going to go deeper, okay, into the science and then come back to the lived experience. So when we talk about listening to the body, we are talking about interoception. Interoception is your nervous system's ability to sense what is happening on the inside. That could be hunger. It could be fullness. It could be the temperature of your body, your heart rate. Are you nauseous? Do you feel warm, tight? Those signals are constantly being sent up from your organs and your tissues to your brain. Now, in a nervous system that has had to survive a lot, interoception often becomes tangled. So, for instance, if you grew up in an environment where maybe your needs were not met or where your emotions were too overwhelming, your system might have learned that internal sensation equals danger. Your body learned perhaps that feeling too much inside gets you in trouble or gets you ignored or gets you flooded and overwhelmed. So eating disorders are not simply about food. They are about how your nervous system learned to manage overwhelming states. Now we see this show up in restricting, obsessing, rigid dieting, binging, purging. And these are not character flaws, okay? That's something I really had to remind myself in my recovery. They are not character flaws. They are survival adaptations. They are ways that the system tries to create control, okay, when the internal world feels uncontrollable. So when you say something like, I have loud thoughts about food, I hear a protector. In internal family systems, which is parts or inner child work, which is a modality that we explore in the Body First Healing program, we might call this a manager part. This is the part that counts calories, criticizes your body, that plans the next meal, that rehearses the rules, and it's trying to organize chaos. That's its job, to manage the chaos. Now, somatically, that chatter often comes in to drown out the sensations that you learned were unsafe to feel, like hunger, like the fullness, the longing, the loneliness, or anger. And these are all felt in the body. So if those feelings had nowhere to go, then food became the arena where they played out. So think of it like this. Now, when you bring somatic experiencing into the picture, we are not forcing you to just listen to your body, okay? That can actually feel threatening early on. So instead, we build your capacity to sense in very small, neutral ways so that interoception feels less like this tidal wave, okay? And more like these little gentle waves that you can meet, that you can dip your toes into. This is where titration comes in. Titration, I'm sure you know titration, which I know many of you are familiar with at this point, is the process of working with the body in micro doses. So instead of diving straight into the most charged sensation, we touch in for a moment and then we step out. Touch in again and then step out. And so over time, your system learns, I can feel this and I won't drown. We also use pendulation, which is that step in and step out. So pendulation means moving awareness or moving our somatic experience between activation and resource, or what feels good, between what is uncomfortable and what feels even slightly more settled. Okay, so for example, if your belly feels tight and your jaw feels softer, then you move your attention, you oscillate between the two. Tight belly, softer jaw. One, then the other. That back and forth movement creates regulation in the nervous system. It brings you back to that natural, resilient, and regulated biorhythm. So in a session, if I was working with a client or in a program like the Body First Healing program, the arc might kind of look like this. We start by finding the body sensations that feel the most neutral or accessible. That could be the weight of your body in the chair. It could be, maybe the temperature of your hands or the feeling of your feet on the floor. Now, this is interoception, okay, that internal tracking in low intensity form. We might notice the loud food thoughts as a protective part, and we don't try to get rid of it, right? We might even thank it for how hard it's had to work for us. And that is what actually begins to soften its grip. And then very gently, we might spend, 3 seconds to 10 seconds noticing the sensation of hunger without labeling it as too much or not enough. We're just noticing the sensation. And then we step away. That's titration. That's pendulation. And as capacity grows, as we're able to dip our toes in deeper and deeper, then we might explore what fullness starts to feel like. So fullness, by the way, is incredibly vulnerable. Okay, biologically, fullness is a state of receiving. It is expansion. And so if your system learned that expansion is dangerous, then fullness will feel like threat. So we titrate fullness very carefully, often bringing in other supportive sensations at the same time, like the feeling of the back of your body being held by the chair. For me personally, in my own recovery, somatic experiencing helped me to understand that my body was not the enemy, that the noise in my head was not proof that I could not be trusted. It was proof that my system was doing everything it knew to keep me safe using very old strategies. And so listening to your body in this context does not mean obeying every impulse. It means slowly relearning which sensations belong to survival and which belong to present day needs. Okay, it means bringing curiosity to your internal world instead of control or abandonment. So if your thoughts about food are loud right now, see if you can hold them as a part that is working very hard. Then, underneath that, notice if there's even one small sensation that feels safe to stay with for 3 to 10 seconds. Okay, that's where the listening begins. All right, guys, let's move into our third question. So what type of massage do you recommend for somatic release, specifically looking for support with back pain? So this is such an important question, and I want to start by naming that chronic back pain is almost never just muscular, okay? It is part of a larger story that your nervous system is telling. From a somatic perspective, the spine and the back muscles are like a scaffolding, okay, for your sense of support and safety. So when you've lived under chronic stress or hypervigilance or freeze, the back often becomes the holding zone. Okay, the musculature braces to keep you upright. Fascia thickens and tightens around long-term contraction around the spine. And the nervous system keeps sending signals to hold it together long after the original threat has passed. So when we talk about massage or body work for somatic release, we're really asking what kind of touch helps the nervous system feel safe enough to let go of some of that bracing, some of that holding together. Now, the first modality that I want to name is biodynamic craniosacral therapy. I am such a fan, you guys. I learned about this during my SE training, and I was such a fan that I actually considered going into this as my next path of education and being a forever student. But this is one of my favorite recommendations, okay, especially for trauma-related pain. So biodynamic craniosacral therapy, first of all, is incredibly subtle, which you guys know I love. The practitioner uses here extremely gentle contact, often at the head, at the sacrum, or along the spine, and then listens to the rhythmic movements of your cranial sacral system and the deeper inherent motion of your tissues and your fluids. Now, from a nervous system perspective, this kind of work speaks directly to the brainstem, the cranial nerves, and the vagus nerve. So it's not about mechanically fixing a muscle. It's about helping the entire system reorganize around safety. Many people during these sessions will experience spontaneous unwinding, deep rest, or even emotional release during or after sessions, especially when there is a history of shock trauma or chronic freeze. Now, the second modality is myofascial release. So fascia is the connective tissue, okay, that wraps every muscle, organ, and nerve like a web. And fascia responds very strongly to trauma and long-term stress. So it can become, almost think of it this way, glued down, thickened, or restricted. And myofascial work uses slow and subtle, sustained pressure and gentle stretching to invite the fascia to melt, right, rather than forcing it. Now, because fascia is so tied to implicit or body memory, when it starts to soften, people will often feel emotions, memories, or body sensations, okay? They will start to surface. And that's not a sign, again, that anything is wrong. It's a sign that what was held in the tissues is finally getting a chance to be processed, metabolized, and moved through. Now, for the back, a skilled myofascial therapist will not only work directly on the erector muscles along the spine, but they might also pay attention to the diaphragm, okay, to the hips, to the psoas muscle, and even the feet. Why? Well, when the diaphragm is tight, the spine works harder. Okay, when the psoas is braced, the low back actually carries the cost of that. Okay, the third category is somatic or SE-informed bodywork. Now, this might not be called massage in the traditional spa sense, okay? But it often looks like someone gently placing a hand at key diaphragms, joints, or viscera or organs of the body. And we hold, we touch, and we wait. And when we do this in our SE touch sessions, there's actually more listening than doing. Okay, the practitioner is tracking your nervous system, your breath, your subtle shifts, and titrating contact so that your system never feels pushed. Now, this style of touch is incredibly supportive for attachment repair, co-regulation, attachment wounding, and also for back pain that has more of a clear trauma component like injuries, falls, car accidents, surgeries, or times that your body had to brace around emotional shock. Now, lastly, deep tissue massage. So deep tissue massage can feel helpful in the short term, but I tend to be cautious with it in early trauma work. Okay, if a nervous system is already on the edge, very aggressive pressure can override the system rather than invite it. So you might feel looser right after, okay? But the next day, do you find that your pain or anxiety is actually worse? That is what we call a rebound effect, okay? And it can be a sign that the body felt pushed. So when you're looking for someone to support somatic release in your back, you might ask, do they understand the nervous system and not just anatomy? Because there is a bidirectional relationship between the two. You can also ask, are they comfortable going slow and following your body's natural pace? Can they include the diaphragm, the sacrum, and the hips as part of the work? Are they open to pauses when you notice strong sensations or emotions to allow the body to discharge what's naturally coming up? Ultimately, the best modality is the one that your system feels safest with. Okay, so if you leave a session feeling a little softer, more connected, and more aware of your body instead of disconnected or maybe even overwhelmed, then that is probably a good sign that the work is somatically aligned for you. Okay, let's move into question 4. How can someone somatically prepare for assisted psychedelic therapy? And what are your thoughts on this? Okay, you guys, so this is a nuanced question. And I want to honor that there are many different experiences here. Now, on one hand, I know people for whom psychedelic-assisted therapy has been deeply expansive and healing. It's helped them to access compassion, insight, parts of themselves that are ready to process and heal, and really just that deeper connection to self that maybe felt out of reach in other modalities. Now, on the other hand, I also have quite a few clients who've come into the Body First Healing program after very overwhelming psychedelic experiences. Some had repressed memories resurface that they were not yet prepared to integrate. Side note here, I was recently on the Soul on Fire podcast with Jordan Younger, who's the Balanced Blonde. If you haven't listened to the episode, I would highly encourage it because Jordan shares very openly and vulnerably in this episode for the first time with me that she went on a psychedelic-assisted journey and she had repressed memories come up. And so this is something that I have seen now with multiple clients. And so again, side note, go listen to that. It's a beautiful, beautiful episode. Coming back to the conversation. So psychedelic-assisted therapy has helped some, but for others, they came out feeling destabilized, flooded, or really disconnected from their bodies. So my stance for it, I would say, is not for or against. My stance is more so that these medicines amplify what is already there. And your nervous system deserves real preparation for that. Now, when I use parts language, I am drawing from, again, internal family systems. And in IFS, we recognize that we all have various parts of us that hold different roles. So protector parts, for instance, are the ones that manage life. They keep you in control. They try to prevent pain. Exiles, on the other hand, are the younger, more vulnerable parts that carry old wounds, shame, fear, grief. Okay, these are our traumatized parts. And then there's self, which is your deepest core of presence, of wisdom, and compassion. Now, with psychedelics, psychedelics can lower the defense of protector parts. and they can bring our exiled or our hurt material closer to the surface. So if you do not have a relationship with these parts beforehand, then the experience can feel like, honestly, being thrown into a room full of feelings and images and memories with no guide. So somatic preparation means that you begin building that relationship before you ever journey into it. And you might be asking, well, how do we do that? So first, from an SE perspective, you want a basic capacity for tracking. Okay, tracking is simply being able to notice one sensation in the body at a time without immediately needing to change it. So that could be feeling the weight of the body, the temperature of your hands, the shape of your breath. Okay, this is your anchor when things intensify. Second, you want to practice titration and pendulation in ordinary life. Remember that titration is working with intensity in these tiny microdoses, and pendulation is that movement between discomfort and resource, right? The back and the forth. Now, if you already know how to do this normally from day to day, then you are far more likely to be able to do it when your internal world is really amplified in this psychedelic journey. Now, you're also going to want some familiarity with your own parts. Okay, that does not mean that you have to be an IFS or a parts expert. It simply means that you can recognize this anxious voice is a young protector. This collapsed feeling belongs to a younger part who felt alone. And this is a steadier part of me that can witness this, that can attune to them. Now, that relational frame is extremely important when content, okay, trauma content or story or memory, we could say, arises in a journey. And this, okay, is why I emphasize most in my programs that you need a plan for integration, which is the final module of the Body First Healing program. Now, integration is where your body and your nervous system digest what happened. Without integration, the experience can kind of sit in your system as just another overwhelming imprint. And this is why some people leave psychedelic work feeling like the doors were blown right off. They felt completely exposed. Okay, so in those moments, the medicine here is not wrong. It's just that it's incomplete. So in terms of how to prepare somatically, I would encourage you to spend time with a couple of things. First, practices that help you return to your body when you're mildly activated. Okay, things like orienting to the room or feeling the support under you or tracking sensations that you feel are tolerable enough to be with, even if they're not pleasant. Learning to notice when your system shifts into fight, flight, shutdown, fawn, right, collapse in your daily life. And then practicing small steps back toward regulation. You can also develop a relationship with a somatic practitioner or a therapist who can really support you before and after. I have always encouraged that when I'm working with clients who are considering doing this. And definitely make sure that this is someone who understands trauma physiology and is not trying to just rush the integration. I've seen these medicines be absolutely incredible catalysts when used inside of a system that has already built up some of that scaffolding of safety. Okay. I've also seen these medicines trigger old implicit memories in ways that were frightening for the people who did not yet have support to hold what came up. So I'd say my final thought on that is that preparing your ecosystem first, okay, gives any medicine that you choose a much more supportive ground to kind of land in. All right, you guys, thank you so much for staying with me. My hope is that as you listen, that you heard pieces of your own story that were spoken back to you in the language of the body. And that hopefully that helped you to feel a little less alone inside of these patterns. Remember, you guys, if this episode resonated with you, that you can share it with someone in your life who you feel might need it. And if you want to go deeper into this kind of work, my book, Body First Healing, and the Body First Healing program are there to hold you, to welcome you, and to support you. I will see you guys next week for our episode on the art of slowing down. Until then, may your body feel just a little more like a place that you can stay. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great week. Thank you so much for tuning into the Body First Healing podcast. If this episode resonated with you, I would be so grateful if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with someone that you love. I'll see you back here next week, and until then, be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best you can with what you have, and that is more than enough. Just a quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a qualified provider for personal support.